family decided to take this away from the court of law and put it in the court of public opinion. And boy, how disappointing and upsetting that is. Myself not being named in the suit directly gives me a little bit more latitude to have conversation about this and talk about it, and that I want to do. And I noticed earlier that somebody had mentioned, you know, the county sheriff and the executive are going to have conversations. They explain some of the things that happened with this tragic death. And I don't know that we're here to explain, but we're calling into question some things that actually took place, and specifically on behalf of the attorney. Now, I read the Macomb Daily this morning, and there was a comment in there specifically talking about the county boss set to defend the county jail today, and that would be myself and Tony. And shocking as it was, I all of a sudden got a text message about an hour ago from the particular attorney in this case. And I was going in a different direction until I got this text message from the attorney, Mr. Erie. Bob Erie is his name, and he's out of St. Clair Shores. This gentleman, when he somehow came in contact with this case, or the individual, the deceased individual, decided to make contact with our corporation counsel. And when he came in to talk to our corporation counsel, his intentions were to try to get a resolution immediately before even filing the lawsuit. And what he came in and asked our corporation counsel was for a settlement of $25 to $30 million in this particular case. Our corporation counsel told him he was being irresponsible in what he was looking for. And so with that being said, he then told them that this could cause for some very negative public attention if we didn't settle this matter behind the scenes. In fact, as I'm looking at his text message today, he is pleading with me now to try to see if there's a way we can come to resolution, because rational minds can come up with a rational decision. It is quite apparent that this attorney is looking for something more than to try to help see what might be of issue or concern in this case through factual matter, and instead decided to give 3 minutes of a 240-hour video to the media to portray that the correctional staff in this county don't care about or aren't concerned with what's going on with the inmates in that facility. Well, if you do the math, and I didn't, my brother did, who happens to be a judge. He helped me out with the math in this case. If you think about 3 minutes out of 240 hours of video, what he portrayed, or what he tried to portray with our officers, was 0.021% of the time spent in this particular facility of the care and custody where there was interactions with our correctional staff and medical staff. 0.021 is what he's trying to present as being factual information as to the lack of care or compassion or concern on behalf of corrections officers in this facility. Well, I'm going to talk about the 0.021 in just a second, but I want to refer to the 99.979% of that video that wasn't shown. And if you look at that video and you watch it, and I'm not even talking about documents that were written and obviously officers' logs and notes that will be presented in court in the proper setting, but it was without question. There were numerous times when those officers had called upon medical staff to come and check and see the welfare of this particular inmate, this individual, many a time. And any time they saw something that looked irregular, something that looked irrational, something that just didn't look normal, they would call the medical staff to respond. And the medical staff would come and make their determination as to what was needed, whether it was mental health, whether it was an issue dealing with his actual medical welfare. And when they do, they would leave, and obviously the question would be, they must have it in hand. Medical personnel do not share information about the medical issues dealing with a particular inmate to the correctional staff, or mental health for that reason, because there's laws that disallow that. So our corrections officers are always trying to be acutely aware that if something doesn't look right, they call upon the medical staff. And that's what happened here. In that 99.979% of that video that wasn't shown. There were numerous times when they did come in and check on this particular person. Well, what's really upsetting is when you look at the 0.021%, that 3 minutes of video that went out, and people are questioning and they're concerned about what happened, it couldn't be compassionate, and even when I saw the video, I must admit, I went, wow, that looks bad. I mean, the way they said this, the way they portrayed it. But the reality is what people don't understand, why the person was naked or didn't have clothing on, or why was the person sleeping on the floor, or why was there another person in his cell. Well, let me help you out with it. Correctional officers, the deputies and the command officers, are taught to be non-confrontational. And if you got an inmate who doesn't want to wear their gown so that, you know, if they are more comfortable being naked in the cell or whatever, you know what? Believe it or not, that's more humane than trying to wrestle somebody into a gown. And so they allow them. If they're comfortable, they're sedate, they're passive, they're not bothering nobody, they don't want to wear that gown, we're not going to wrestle them into a gown. If they don't want to lay on their bunk, they decide they want to lay on the floor because it provides a little bit more comfort. The correctional officers don't go in there with a tactical unit or team to try to force them onto the bunk. They allow them to lay on the ground if that's where they want to lay. Double bunking is something that you're going to see throughout the country because of obviously overcrowding issues. But even more importantly to that, specifically when you have people that have mental health issues, you're concerned about maybe they're not in the right set of mind and they might want to harm themselves. So sometimes we give them a partner, we put them in there. But if there is a confrontation with a particular individual or individuals in a cell, they're immediately removed. And even in that 0.021% of the video, that 3-minute video, you see that happening, where there was a confrontation and the other individual was removed from that cell. So the correctional officers responded each and every time. But the one that I got to tell you that was most compelling to me when I watched that video that told me that these corrections officers and the people in that facility do care about what's going on with those inmates was the last 30 seconds of that video. The last 30 seconds of this individual's life. The correctional officer called for the medical support. The medical staff, however they decided to take a look at or wanted to respond to it, responded to it. But the correctional officer still had compassion enough and care enough to stare at that video monitor and watch that individual. And as he watched that individual, what he saw was something had stopped. His chest stopped rising. And within 30 seconds, time it on a stopwatch, that officer was in that cell providing CPR to that particular individual. That is compelling, folks, if you think about it. And why do I say that? You can't get that kind of a response from an EMS, from a fire department or police department at your own home, or even in this building right now if somebody was to have a heart attack. You couldn't get somebody here pumping on your chest in 30 seconds. And I dare say that even some of our medical facilities, hospitals, you're probably going to have a hard time if you start to code in one of their facilities, having somebody there in 30 seconds pumping on your chest. So this has been disturbing at many levels. And why do I say that? Because of the public concern and people thinking something's wrong within the confines of that jail. It is upsetting because, you know what? I've worked there for 30 years. I've seen how the officers interact. I understand what they do and the difficulties of some of the people that are coming our way with mental health and substance abuse problems. And for somebody to portray that these officers did something wrong and not allow the system of law that we have here in this country, that I've understood for 30 years, and still for 5 years as a student of criminal justice. The court of law is where the facts are supposed to be put in and presented so that people have a chance to defend themselves. The corrections officers, Tony, myself, we were told, you know what, you can't really defend yourself when there's a lawsuit present. And this attorney knew that. This attorney knew that because he tried to strong-arm the county from day one, and telling them that if you don't come up with 25 to 30 million, if you're not willing to talk high numbers like that, this is going to be a media spectacle. We're going to do something about that. So you better come to the table. When the county rebuffed that request, obviously he made good on his promise. And the timing of it couldn't have been better, by the way. The timing of it happened to be with some court hearings that were taking place. That I know about through talking to our corporation counsel. But if anybody is here today to try to expect us to answer in specifics about each and every detail during the 240 hours video, that's not happening. The court of law is where that's supposed to happen. If anybody's here to ask me, well, what about the medical professionals? Do you think they did something wrong? I'm not a doctor. And far be it for any one of us here in this room to sit there and question what the medical staff did in a particular case dealing with a particular inmate in that facility. The proper setting for that is in a court of law, not in the court of public opinion. But the court of public opinion right now is at an all-time low as to how we treat and how we deal with prisoners in that facility because of one attorney. His name is Bob Erie. But in my opinion, I think he's irresponsible in what he did. He is an officer of the court. He should know better than what he just did to the members of that department because he's looking for some financial gain of his own as a result of the death of an individual that was in our correctional facility. So with that being said, there are other issues that we're facing within this county that are far greater right now than just what we're dealing with in the county jail. Substance abuse has taken a heavy hit with funding. $18 million a while ago. Today, we are now seeing, today, it happens to be today as a matter of fact, $28 million is going to be cut in Macomb County from mental health funding for people out on the streets, much less the issues we're dealing with in that county jail right now. $28 million. We have become the new asylum for mental health and substance abuse patients. We are trying our best, and the correctional staff and the people working in there, they get it, they understand that they need to be compassionate. They need to work to try to figure out how do they get them that support from those that are contracted in helping us deal with prisoner care in our custody. Well, this issue is going to get bigger, and I'm hoping that the media works with me in trying to find a better solution as to how we're dealing with the problems out in society and bringing it to attention to our legislators, those in Washington, those in Lansing, to figure out how do we continue funding to deal with the problems that we're seeing in society, and that's the substance abuse and mental health issues that are facing us. There's nowhere else to be putting these people right now but correctional institutions. These are major issues we're dealing with, and it's the #1 issue that is being taken on right now by the National Association of Counties. The #1 issue, mental health and substance abuse. We need to make sure that before we start being critical of what's going on behind those four walls, that we have all the facts, not just 0.021% of the information. So as you can tell, I am extremely disappointed in this attorney. He knows better. He's a municipal attorney out of St. Clair Shores, and in my opinion, he was being irresponsible in how he was handling this and portraying the officers in this department. With that being said, I'm now going to turn it over. He is very limited in his comments because he has been named in this lawsuit. I get it. When I was a sheriff, I was never sued before in my entire life as a police officer for 20 years until I became the sheriff. Then all of a sudden, every one of those issues became your issue, and you now have to be very cautious in what you say if you are named as a person in that particular suit. Tony has, but he is going to speak a little bit on behalf of the correctional officers and obviously the service we provide in that facility to make sure people realize we do care about the custody of people in the correctional institution. Tony?
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for that passion. Again, there's a lot I'd like to say, but obviously I cannot. I raised my right hand and I swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States. And in that Constitution, there's the freedom of speech. And I understand that freedom of speech is what you guys and gals in the media work on, okay? But over the last, put the glasses on here, over the past week, in the Macomb County Sheriff's Office, the 516 men, women who proudly serve this county have been portrayed by one news story as reckless, inhumane, neglectful, and not caring about human life. The story may have been published, in my opinion, to shine false light on the office of sheriff. As sheriff of Macomb County, I know that this is farther than the truth. Standing behind me are union leaders for the corrections deputies, the deputy sheriffs, and the command officers who all work inside the confines of the county jail and provide the most professional care and custody to over 19,000 inmates that come through our doors yearly. As I stated previously, the death of David Stacheski, it is tragic, and our thoughts do go out to the family. But we also have to think about the men and women that work at the sheriff's office, the ones that were providing that medical care when he died. Again, I cannot comment any further on this because of the litigation. What I can say is that I want the residents of Macomb County to know that our office is truly committed to providing a professional service to all members of our county that they come in contact with. The story and the comments that followed by members, and I will list the WDIV, were, in my opinion, unwarranted, not factual, and may have been published, in my opinion, with reckless disregard. The inaccurate story damaged the reputation of the Macomb County Sheriff's Office, in my opinion, for no good reason. We have received many emails, letters, calls, condoning us, threatening us, telling our staff to quit. Our members went out in the public, our deputies, they're approached. Comments are directed at them that I really feel are unwarranted. As sheriff, I can take the criticism. That's part of my job. But that criticism is not justified to the members of the sheriff's office, whether they work inside the jail or out on the road. They care about you. They keep you safe. They'll solve your problems. And most importantly, they will give up their life for you. You know, we have said from the beginning that our deputies did the job, and now we see that the story is changing and additional facts are coming out. Because of my position, I don't expect an apology. But I think the men and women of the Macomb County Sheriff's Department deserve one. We live in troubling times with increasing mental health and substance abuse issues, problems. They're plaguing our community. We are working on solutions. We're not sitting back doing nothing. We have a contracted a consultant, Voorhees Robertson Justice Services. They're working diligently to provide us with acceptable, workable, financially sound solutions to our increasing jail population with special needs, complex problems, and an outdated infrastructure. I truly hope that this press conference gets the same attention nationwide that the original story did. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. And just to follow up on that, where we're headed, I mean, that's the thing I think the media needs to really be engaged and supportive in at least helping us with this. They're always talk about, you know, what are we doing, how do we deal with the influx of population, mental health, substance abuse related issues. And quite honestly, jail facilities throughout the country are not the place for that. Why? Because we don't have the trained professionals, except for those that we contract the service with, to truly deal with the needs of society. And so with that being said, what we're trying to do here in Macomb County is not build a new jail. Everybody keeps talking about, my gosh, you know, there's overcrowding stories all the time. What are you going to do, build a new jail? You build, they will come. Meaning if we build another 100 beds, 1,000 beds, they're going to fill them. They're going to be there. The question becomes, how do we get smarter with the prisoner population we're dealing with today? And the prisoner population we're dealing with does have mental health issues. They do have substance abuse issues. They do have medical needs. And so with that being said, how are we dealing with it on the onset? So here in Macomb County, we're not about to spend a dime on construction or reconstruction until we figure out exactly what we're dealing with. And what do I mean by that? If we are able to find out through a central intake and assessment process when somebody is coming in contact with law enforcement, what the true needs of that person are, there needs to be diversion on the front end to try to assess and address the issue before we start putting them through the process or the system itself, wasting taxpayers' money. And on the end, we're saving money because we're not putting them in a facility where they're warehousing them and waiting for their out date to occur. So we have been working on this, as Tony had mentioned. We spent $250,000 on a study that we're about a half a year into already. When that study comes out, we're going to be talking to other experts to try to help us be the lead, not just in Macomb County, not just in the region or the state of Michigan, but throughout the country. We want to look at this because we truly understand the problem that exists in society, specifically with those that are coming in contact with law enforcement. But we are going to call upon the media for your help and your support to really get this message out there. Because, boy, I'll tell you, with all the funding cuts and all the other lack of interest on behalf of some people, unless you know somebody who has a mental health problem or you know somebody who has a substance abuse problem, you don't know where to turn to. And here, government is supposed to try to provide solutions. Well, that's what we're doing here in Macomb County, and we're going to continue to do. So with that being said, I'm going to open it up for some questions, but understand I am not, nor is Tony, going to be specific about incidences that might pertain to this case that should be, I guess, discussed in a court setting. So
First of all, we have all 240 hours of the video. It took our staff over 6 weeks to go through all 240 hours of that video. Our staff watched all of that video. What's most troubling to us on that video is in the last 44 hours of David's life, nobody had any hands on him at all. At one point in the last 44 hours, trustee does come in and take some food away and put some new food there. Can you address the care that takes place that we can't see on just a videotape? Because that's what we had to work with, is a videotape.
yeah, and I don't want to be specific to this particular incident like you're talking, Kevin. I think what you do have sometimes is if the medical personnel is called in and they're looked upon. Sometimes do they come in and look at a monitor? Sometimes do they come in and directly have a connection with the inmate? Yeah, absolutely. So it's up to the corrections officers to take a look and say, okay, does he look different than he did before the last person came in? Do I need to call medical again to take a look at this person? But suffice it to say, there's no question about it. Based upon that last 30 seconds, medical staff, I should say correctional staff, were watching this particular individual. And there's no question that they were concerned about this individual because of the response that was given the moment that his chest stopped moving. So I can't get specific as to what happened in the last 44 hours, documentation, but that needs to be brought up in a court setting. The factual information behind that, and those are the questions that are going to be asked by attorneys, whether it's because of a criminal matter, which this is not, or because of a civil matter. There are going to be depositions taken, people talked about, documents that are going to be trading between, obviously, the attorney on behalf of the clients and the county. That all takes place in a courtroom setting. So we're not here to defend exactly what happened minute by minute, hour by hour, but I'm here to tell you there is absolutely no question, based upon the information that we know, We are extremely comfortable with the work that the officers did, and I'm not here to be critical on behalf of the medical staff because that's not my area of expertise. So, yes?
Or just playing devil's advocate here, and I think the sheriff needs to address this. If nothing was done wrong, why does the FBI come in to investigate?
Go ahead. I wanted to, but go ahead.
Yep. Why does the FBI come in to investigate? Good question. I get a call on Friday afternoon from the senior special agent at the Clinton Township office, who got a call from downtown Detroit FBI office, who got a call from the DOJ in Washington, D.C., where it was portrayed that somebody was reading the Washington Post and was reading the horrible and deplorable and neglectful conditions of the Macomb County Jail, and they inquired if the FBI here in Detroit or the local office had opened up a case or had investigated this. And when he explained that to me, my first words were, please come on in. We'll give you everything. We have nothing to hide. We did an internal investigation. We did an investigation. So, again, I was unable to say anything. And I welcome the FBI.
Well, so do you
My thing was to encourage the FBI.
So do you think they're investigating without knowing the true facts already, or?
I can't comment on the FBI. You would have to contact them. They inquired, they had asked, I offered, I encouraged, I welcomed the doors. Open up, come on in, take a look at the investigation and see if we did anything wrong. Anything further, you'd have to contact the FBI on that.
Was there any consideration to having an outside source do the internal investigation, like the Michigan State Police or someone else, or is that not how it's done?
And depending on the case, again, we reviewed the case and what our officers did, and we didn't think. I have in the past, in certain cases that are currently litigated, we have sent them out to the state police. I am not afraid to send this out anywhere. But on this one here, is when the facts come out, I can't talk about it, but.
So, sorry, pardon me. You discussed the overcrowding issues in the jail, the increasing troubles you're having with the populations that you're working with in terms of substance abuse and mental health. I guess if the situation is so dire that you lay out, which it is obviously, why are people being picked up and jailed over traffic tickets? Isn't that?
Can I grab this?
Please.
That's an interesting question. Again, everybody wants to be critical and everybody wants to point a finger when you talk about the judges. I mean, that is an entirely different conversation. Judges are being looked upon when it comes to people that come in front of their court. Are they collecting enough fines? By the state court administrator's office. So judges are being judged. Judges are being criticized for not doing what they're doing and collecting amount of fines. So now they're being pressured to make sure they're collecting fines for people. In this particular case, the individual's brought in because he can't pay those fines. I get it. We use community corrections on a regular basis is looking at each one of these inmates and trying to make a determination. Is there someplace else we could send them? Can we get them into some other location and get them out of the jail? That's their job to figure that out. In this particular case, the individual is given the opportunity to get out early. But obviously, because maybe his condition or his lack of interest, he decided not to. So, to say that, the judge did something wrong here, wow, inappropriate. Let's turn the tables here. You got a person that has a substance abuse issue, which has been reported. You've got a person that maybe mental health concerns are associated with it as well. We come in contact with law enforcement, goes in front of a judge, and the judge decides to say, you know what, just let him go. A day later, gets behind the wheel of a car and ends up hurting somebody. That becomes a news story, and it associates with the judge as to why didn't you, when you had him in front of you, send him to jail? So, I mean, it's a very complex issue that everybody wants to simplify. They want to say a $750 fine, a guy's in a jail. I agree, we don't need him there. We're working with community corrections. We're working with mental health staff. But when they're in our facility, the corrections officers don't judge any of that. The corrections officers and the staff of the jail just realize there's somebody here in our facility. And now our job is to watch that person, figure out what's going on here, and if there's somewhere that we need to get attention to, we get attention to it. So for any one of us to be critical of the judiciary, of the mental health, the medical staff, or anyone else, that is not within our realm. The media wants to be critical of it. That's okay. But the question becomes, what are the facts behind the rational basis as to why people are doing what they're doing? And in this case here, the biggest concern I have is the negative attention drawn to the Sheriff's Department based upon 0.021% of 240 hours of video. And you know what? And if there are questions about the other 240 hours, allow that to take place in a courtroom setting. That's the system of justice we have here in this country. Why are we doing this in the public? Why are we doing this in the media? Embarrassing people, because when in the end, we come to find out that, you know what? The officers really didn't do anything wrong. They did care. They did tend to their needs. You know what? The medical staff, whether there was or wasn't an issue, that'll come out later on as time goes on. Then it's the time to be critical. But by God, I'm going to tell you right now, if for some reason they found that these officers did absolutely nothing, in fact, the last officer probably should be given some kind of an award because he did try to save the life of this individual, That won't get nearly attention that this has gotten nationally already. Nobody will be talking about that. That's all it'll go off is in 2 or 3, 5 years from now. Hey, do you remember that bad incident that happened, that the correctional officer did something wrong? No. In fact, in court, it was found completely different. The officers did nothing. There was no deliberate indifference on behalf of these officers whatsoever while this individual was in their care and custody. None. I mean, that's the thing that's most
Do you
upsetting.
find it concerning that someone died in the jail over a period of 16 days, slowly demising, losing 50 pounds and dying?
Well, that's in question, too. When somebody says somebody lost 50 pounds in that period of time, I find that difficult to believe. That needs to be factually vetted. You know, there needs to be a fact check on that. I don't know if that's true. So when somebody tells me and they put it out there, everybody else is saying the same thing. It's like the individual brother. People want to talk about his medical issue, that he had to go to the hospital because he had some kind of an infection, something that was self-induced. And if people really understood really what happened and why he had to go to the hospital, that we as taxpayers had to pay for, they'd be appalled. They'd be appalled at why this individual went to the hospital, and we as taxpayers had to pay for that. But yet, you've got to try to figure out how do you be somewhat compassionate and concerned because of the loss of his brother. And we're not allowed, and thus the reason why we're here today, we're not allowed to talk about any of this. I'm not allowed to defend the officers because we got pending litigation. That ain't happening. This attorney knew that. He knew that he put us at a disadvantage. He had our hands tied behind our backs. And so what he said is, you know what, I'm going to leverage that. I'm going to leverage that by talking to your corporation counsel and strong-arm them into some kind of a settlement before a case is filed. So I'm going to ask them for 25 to 30 million. And if you don't do that, guess what? The extortion tactics are going to start to proceed. I'm going to put this out to the media and get them involved to try to embarrass your department. And then hopefully you'll come to the table and reach some kind of a settlement. Well, that just isn't happening. And my advice to corporation counsel is I wouldn't even allow right now the insurance companies to try to help settle this case. I know they're worried because it costs more sometimes to litigate and all that, but I'm going to tell you right now, based upon what this attorney did and his irresponsible nature, I'm going to talk to corporation counsel, and hopefully they take my advice, but they're the attorneys, to say, you know what, we're not settling this. We're going to take this as far as we can because I am that confident in the work of these officers and what they did in that facility that there was no deliberate indifference on their behalf whatsoever. And when it comes to the medical side, they're going to have to defend their case, and far be it for me to judge them what they did. But allow the court process to take place and let them make that determination.
So if we back it up, obviously you preferred him to get care before he was even in this situation, but I've interviewed, talked to countless parents who are so frustrated. They can't get care for their adult children in the mental health facilities because they're adults, there's nothing they can do. They try over and over again, they watch their kids turn into homeless drug addicts. So where do we go?
You are so right.
Where do we go?
It is such a real issue, and I got to believe everybody in this room probably. And if you don't raise your hand, or I'm not asking you to raise your hand, but if you didn't raise your hand, if I asked you to, if you knew somebody personally, somebody in your own family, or somebody that's a friend that has a substance abuse mental health issue, you are a very fortunate person. Because I'm going to tell you, most people, myself included, have had to deal with that. And the question becomes, what do you do with them? What are we doing with these people? How are we helping them? Where are we getting them the assistance? And unless you're of means, financial means, it's even more difficult for people that have less ability to pay for some kind of support. So many people, believe it or not, they're sometimes hoping that they come in contact with law enforcement and that they go to the jail. You know why? At least they're safe there overnight. At least they're going to be not doing the drugs or harming somebody. And that's what we're here for, to try to make sure they're safe while they're in our custody. And that's what the correctional officers did. But the reality of the problem is, how do we deal with that when you're seeing so much funding being cut right now? As I just got to mention, today, another $28 million in Macomb County alone is being cut from the mental health programs that we have here. I mean, so where's our, I guess when you start to look at it, where's our focus? How do we prevent this from happening to begin with? Because we don't want to come in contact with them, with law enforcement. We don't want them warehoused in our correctional facilities. It's not the appropriate setting. And so many people are looking for help. And even while they're there, let's be honest, they're not getting the real assistance and help that they need to correct that mental health problem or that substance abuse problem. They stay for that particular time and they're back out on the street. They're back out on the street, and many a time they go back to doing what they were doing because of that environment they were once in. So, we really need to start rethinking as a society. I mean, we're a developed country. When are we going to start really focusing on the true issue here right now? I mean, this is a tragedy. This is sad. This is a sad reality of the real problem that's out there in society. How do we start helping these people before they even come in contact with law enforcement? That's the goal we want to get to here in Macomb County. But even when they do, how do we assess and address that and get them the help that's necessary? That's something that I have a true impact on, And that's something that we've been working forward on. We've gotten the support for the funding from the Board of Commissioners to make sure that that study goes forward. And once we start coming up with a plan, an idea, that's when we're going to call upon the public, and hopefully through the media, to say, hey, this is important. Maybe it might not affect you. Maybe you don't care or concerned about what's going on behind those four walls. If it's not a compassion issue, then make it a financial issue. That investment on the front end is going to save us a tremendous amount of money on the back end of dealing with people in society that are causing problems or that are taking up bed spaces in our correctional facilities. It's a huge cost. It's a sad reality. We've got to tell people we're spending more on corrections in this state than we do on public education for kids in schools and higher education. That's a sad reality. Yes, sorry.
You mentioned that in the last witness's line, officers and everything. Do you feel they did everything they were leading up to?
What I'm going to say is, and I'm going to say it again, based upon the 240 hours, these officers tended to the care of that individual by calling upon the appropriate staff from medical health and or mental health, bringing it to their attention. They did what they were responsible to do, and it's bringing to the attention a problem with somebody that they perceive. If they see something that just doesn't look right, or a person who looks like they might be sick or might need more attention, and there's regular visits, by the way, that the doctors do with some of their patients that they have in there, not just when the corrections officers call upon them. So the corrections officers may all of a sudden go, you know what, the doctors are just in here, he seems okay, well, maybe I'll keep an eye on him just to see anyways. So there are regular visits on behalf of the correctional staff as well as the mental health staff. But that visual of watching this person on a regular basis, yeah, I mean, it was, I believe, and again, I can't be specific on it, shortly thereafter, the correction officer still said, man, this person just doesn't look right. I mean, think about that. You got a correction officer that's got monitors and he's watching other things going on, but he focused on that particular person. He's looking at him thinking, something just doesn't look right here. You know, and he's watching him and he sees that the chest stops moving. I mean, that is incredible. You talk about, you know, hard to watch a man die. Think about the corrections officer that saw that happen and jumped out of his chair and went in there and called medical staff while he's in the process of doing it to get on his chest and start providing CPR. That's incredible if you think about it. That's somebody who cares. That's somebody who was really responsive to this person's particular needs at that case. And he's not a medical professional. It was just somebody who said, you know what, I got to intervene before the medical staff gets here right now because this guy isn't breathing. Something stopped.
Mark, do the corrections officers at the jail, do they have the ability to just call, I don't want to say 911, but an ambulance if they see something awry? What's the protocol? Do they have to call the
No,
staff?
they call
Or
medical
do
staff.
They just make the choice to say, this guy looks bad, I'm calling, we're getting somebody here.
Medical staff. That's what they call upon immediately
What
if
can
there's
they
something with
do,
the corrections officer.
and, you know,
Yeah.
could they have done that, I guess, in this case?
It's the, you know, again, I can't talk about the case, but those that are in distress, they call medical, whether they use the phone or they all have radios, and the medical staff is in the facility, and they come and tend to what the emergency is. Depending on the situation, the medical staff would make the determination of if the individual could be treated inside the facility or if they need to be transported to the hospital. Then they make the decision on whether the individual is going to be transported by a car or by an ambulance. That's all made by the medical staff.
That's all medical staff.
Yep.
So your corrections officers don't make the call in determining if the ambulance has to be
That,
called.
you know, our 911 system is our medical staff because they're in-house. We have medical staff on duty 24 hours a day.
So they can't really override with the medical staff. That's a medical staff decision, is what I'm asking.
That's correct.
in
We
terms
don't-
of what to
Yep.
do.
diagnose.
Yep.
I'm sorry, is that different than the privately contracted medical staff now you're talking about? Or
That's
we're talking about CCS?
that's our medical staff that's
Don't
in.
have a 911? 911's
No,
not.
inside the facility, if there's a medical emergency, they contact the medical staff, CCS, our medical providership.
Did we discuss this with CCS at all, and what is their take on all this?
Yeah, CCS is going to be handling the litigation in this particular case. So I mean, obviously we have county attorneys that are involved in this, but they're going to be handling the litigation. And I believe they went through the same process. If I'm not mistaken, again, you'd have to, I believe, it is my belief that apparently the same tactic that was used on the county attorneys was the same tactic used on those that worked for CCS as well. Meaning, we need to have a conversation, here's what we're looking for, and if you don't, this could become a public issue. So once again, the attorney is trying to force some kind of a settlement in this particular case, and as a result, trying to embarrass or give an impression that either the medical staff and or the county did something appropriate. You know, to answer your question about the 911 thing, you got an infirmary that is a contractor in an infirmary. I mean, these people are medical professionals. They're trained. They're doctors. If something is wrong, they come and they look at the actual individual, like this particular case. Our officer immediately is on him doing CPR as he was trained. You got the medical staff rushing in there to try to figure out what's going on. They're realizing that the person's heart isn't beating, and in the process, somebody else in the medical facilities is calling to get an ambulance over there because they're going to have to ship him out to a hospital. They recognize that, and that's what happened here. So we understand this process. This isn't something new. The county jail has been here for, well over 60 years for crying out loud. I mean, it's been around forever, this jail. We understand the process, and people do get medical help. And are people transported in and out of there on a regular basis? You bet they are. This was no different. The difference is somebody decided to give a snippet of what happened in that facility during that time. And you're right. It didn't look good because you had a naked man. It didn't look good because he was very irritable. It didn't look good because he's laying on the ground. It didn't look good because he had another bunkie in that facility at the time that he got into a particular confrontation with, all within a 3-minute period. I get that. That happens, I guess, on a regular basis where people decide they don't want to wear their shirts, where they decide they want to lay on the floor, where they get into a confrontation with another bunkie and the bunkie is removed, or somebody decides that they want to eat their meal while they're laying on the floor and they're really not coherent. But if the person gets up and he goes, hey, somebody ate my meal, I need another one, we provide him another meal. I mean, so these things do happen. There's explanations for that 3-minute video that we can get to. But the reality was trying to give an impression that these officers just don't care, or the policies need to be changed in that facility. Wow, I gotta defend that to some very strong extent without getting too detailed in everything that's going forward dealing with our corporation counsel, because somebody wants to strong arm us out of a $25–30 million settlement, which just isn't
Have
happening.
either of you guys watched the 240 hours?
No, and I need not. I need not look at that. That's what the corporation counsel's for. That's what the courtroom setting is for. I'm not here to be judgmental or critical of that. That's not my responsibility. And again, with the officers, and I'm sure Tony has seen quite a bit of that. He may be able to speak to that, but again, I would caution him against that on behalf of corporation counsel.
I know you said everything, there were no, when you guys did the internal investigation, there were no discipline, there was nothing like that, everything was correctly done according to what you were indicating. Have there been at all just any changes that you can talk about, or are you looking at, is there anything we can do different or should do different?
Yeah. The only change I would see, and I recommended it to the sheriff at this point in time, is the next time something like that comes out, don't be silent. I know you're being cautioned on behalf of your corporation counsel, but somebody wants to take a shot at you and they want to try to be critical of what went on when you know full well it didn't. Stand tall and make sure that you're out front of it. Even though somebody is saying, well, hang on, you got to be very careful of what you're saying, because sometimes this may play out badly in a courtroom setting. Well, you know what? The court of public opinion is just as dangerous for a public official as a courtroom setting is. And so, with that being said, I sometimes have stepped out of the bounds, and I've stepped over, I guess, a recommendation on corporation counsel. And I know they cringe when I say that. They cringe when I do it. But the reality is, you know what? People need to know that I'm not there defending our actions or our policies. It's the actions of the officers that were working in that facility that I know damn well did what they needed to do to care and tend to an individual. And you got an attorney out there that was out there strong-arming the county trying to get a payday as a result of the death of an individual. That is irresponsible, in my opinion.
Were there any changes with CCS that you can talk about?
I don't believe so.
You can't talk about it.
I don't believe so, but even if there were, I couldn't talk
So
about it.
everyone who was there at that time is still there, everybody's still working?
My
everybody's
understanding
still
is
there?
that is correct. I don't know for certain.
And you guys still have CCS
Yes.
for contracted services?
Yes.
CCS was the only bidder on the contract, is there a reason for that?
Well, obviously, we went out to an RFP because our contract was going to expire with CCS, and the RFP went out, and CCS was the only person that responded, only company that responded to the bid process.
Do you know why that is? Can you speculate?
I have no idea. You would have to contact the other medical, correctional, institutional medical providers and see why they wouldn't bid the contract.
And Sheriff, do you know the current contract, those are usually for a year or so, or 2 years, or what's the contract with CCS?
I think
Michelle,
ours,
you might know specifically.
It expires at the end of this year.
it was a 3-year with an extension. Is that correct? It was originally a 3-year with a 1-year extension.
And then, in terms of the when you were talking about Mr. Erie and the contact with Corporation Counsel, can you tell us when that was? Was this litigation was filed in March? Do you know when this?
Yeah, I don't know the exact date. But I can tell you today, as a result of that, I haven't heard from him not once about this particular case, nothing. And then all of a sudden, on the front page of Macomb Daily, there comes this article that we're standing tall on this issue, and not about to just sit back and be, continuously ridiculed, publicly for actions that we took and tried to help with this individual. All of a sudden, I get this lengthy text message from the attorney trying to tell us, well, we need to be reasonable. Let's sit down and let's talk. Let's see if we can't come up with a resolution and if we can settle this case. I think what you got. Oh, and by the way, I didn't just send the 3-minute snippet to the media. I also sent the entirety of the 240 hours to the media. But I didn't call the media. I wasn't the one that prompted this. The media prompted this. I mean, it was incredible. I did share this with one of the media personalities here that had the original contact with him. I mean, this couldn't be more disappointing. And here on the day of, a press conference were happening, wow, what a tremendous coincidence that happens to be. Again, as I mentioned, and I'm going to say it again, you talk about an attorney that is being, in my opinion, irresponsible. That is absolutely unacceptable. His behavior, his tactics, and what he had done to the reputation of these men and women working in that sheriff's department. Irresponsible, in my opinion.